What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of a work balance? Do we live to work or work to live? We're going to ask that question and others of our next guest, Dave Ford. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You know, it has been a long time since I've seen you, and I'm just delighted to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. I dressed for you.
I can tell. Wow.
Well, you know, my office clothes are t-shirt and shorts and bare feet because I'm a yoga instructor. So the office is the studio. So when I get out of the office, I like to dress up.
Well,
That's the opposite of what other people do.
So you actually do have still a suit and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of back of the closet.
I always thought of you as someone carrying a skateboard under their
Really?
arm.
Yeah, at 45.
Yeah.
That's hot. That's a good
But
look.
I mean, you were the oldest young skateboarder I knew.
It's true, although I never skateboarded. You know, the only time I skateboarded, I was 10 years old. It was the mid-1960s. I was in Los Angeles at my aunt and uncle's house with my family. I got on a skateboard. I was 10. And slipped off it. The skateboard went flying through a plate glass window, sliding door, and broke it. That's the only time I've ever been on a skateboard.
But yet it has stuck in my mind.
Isn't that funny?
As a brand.
Yeah, it's probably because I'm just an idiot.
No, you're not an idiot. I mean, you joked about my lead-in to you, alliteration versus levitation. But when I met you in 1986, you were writing for the San Francisco
When we were
Sentinel.
3 years old.
Actually, you were 3, and I just found out I was 2 because you're older than me and look younger, and I'm really kind of upset about
Don't
that.
you hate
But
that?
that's another conversation. No Botox there, right, either?
No.
Because do yoga instructors do Botox?
Some.
I mean, isn't that kind of like antithetical?
Here's the thing. As with everything, people get ideas about what yoga is, just like everything, like what being gay is or being a Christian is, right? And we get these boxes of ideas that aren't based really on experience. I mean, arguably, if your yoga is fixing up your face with Botox, then that's your yoga.
Yeah, because there is yoga of everything. You can have yoga of drinking coffee, yoga of whatnot.
I know. The original, I mean, where this gets lost is the original idea of yoga and truth of yoga in ancient India, Tibet, Nepal. The physical postures were just preparing the body for meditation. True yoga is meditation, and meditation is, deep penetration of the mysteries of the mind and the universe and the inner universe, right? And so, there was a sort of about 40 years ago, all the young hippie kids went to India, and some of them brought back yoga. And Bay Area was a real hot spot and breeding ground long before this more recent boom. But we're Americans, so we're physically strong, and we are good at capitalism.
I was going to say, we find a way to market meditation.
We market everything. So the physical yoga, now the 99% in American yoga is the physical. I'm going to do the workout. Or biggest oxymoron I've ever heard is a yoga boot camp. Like, really? And the 1% is meditation. We get it backwards. But in India, 99% meditation and 1% physical yoga.
Yeah. Well, as usual, because we run into each other every few years, and again, kind of back into a conversation that usually starts on Castro Street in front of the pizza place and ends 5 years later in front of the Dalai Lama. So let's back into this interview again. Met you in the mid-'80s. You were writing for the Sentinel. You talk about being put in boxes, both whether you're Christian or gay. Your mother is an Episcopal priest.
She is.
You have many different influences on your life. How did you make the transition from being someone who was based in journalism, based in the gay community, whatever that is,
right,
to becoming a yoga instructor? And I may say, and I don't mean this as a compliment or not, it's just a fact, your personality as the skateboard writer is the same as a yoga instructor. You don't strike me as a guru.
No, I hope not. I would be, I suppose the best gurus, if you want to call them that, not the literal guru from India and stuff, but I think the best examples to me are the people who are flawed. You know what I mean? And who understand their flaws, work with their flaws, and have learned a little humility and wisdom as a result of knowing their flaws. And I'm not saying I'm there, but when I started getting into yoga about 6 years ago, part of me was so afraid of being the sort of in the box, the fake yoga instructor, which every yoga instructor is doing their best. I don't want to make fun of anybody.
Right.
But
really you clearly have one in mind.
I didn't want to have the bells and so I did rock and roll yoga, and I would blast Led Zeppelin. Do you know what I mean? And I was at a climbing gym on Harrison Street, and everybody loved it. Then my practice kind of quieted down, and now I don't blast rock and roll anymore. I'm sort of who I am. So let's see, journalism, my last job was at the San Francisco Chronicle. I left there in 2003, and I'd kind of gotten tired of journalism completely. I mean, I was a newspaper guy, and newspapers were changing, and the internet was full on and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote 3/4 of a mystery novel that I didn't finish, and then I started playing music, and I made 3 albums, with 2 with a friend of mine and 1 on my own, and played some shows and stuff. And then a friend was taking a yoga teacher training, and another friend of mine was one of the guys leading it. And I asked that guy, what do you think? I kind of think I want to take this thing. And by the end, I knew I wanted to teach, and so I started.
It's interesting, from that experience, it wasn't that you said, I want to take more yoga. I want to teach.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something about your personality that just needs to express and help or be of service? And is that something you think you get from your mom?
I think it's something that, it was in my 40s that I realized my role in the world. It took that long, to my mid-40s, which is I'm a communicator. And whatever shape that takes is going to be the shape it takes, teaching yoga or writing or playing music. But I need to, if you and I are going to sit down, I've got to tell you about this show I just saw.
Right.
It's great, you should see it. You know what I mean? And I think all humans have that.
The innate desire to storytell.
Yes. And so teaching yoga for me is just passing on something that's relaxing and calming in a world that's anxious. And so that's what I like to do in terms of my classes. Writing, it was always, look, I see things this way and I want to tell you about it. And not that my way is right, it's just that I see these things this way.
You said something interesting that, and I mean this seriously, is kind of affirming for me. I'm 53, and I really don't believe I started to grow up until I was 40. And it wasn't because I felt as any more grown up, but it was like, my husband threw me a 40th birthday party. I was like, oh gosh, this is a benchmark.
Yeah.
I have to act grown up. Do you think now that people are living longer, or maybe we have so much exposure to stuff through the internet, that people really are taking more time to grow up, or have we always still been children at 40 or 50?
I don't know the answer, because I've only been 40 once and 50 once, and now I'm 58. You know what I mean? This is my experience. The way I think of it isn't so much growing up anymore, because that's another box. You're either like acting like a kid with a skateboard, or you're a grown up. And what is that supposed to mean? What I think of it as is growing down. I've felt like I've been flying across the world, not literally around the world, but I've always been like 5 inches above the ground, moving really fast. And it was the last maybe 5 or 6 years I felt like I really got my feet on the earth. And so I think it's growing down, really.
Yeah.
And I'm going to grow down and down and down and down and down, and eventually my life will end and I'll be sprinkled onto the earth. I don't often get this philosophical with people, but I do with you, because it's so wonderful to have a conversation with someone who will tell me exactly what they feel. You've seen a lot in the Castro and the gay community in the last few years, the last decades. Yeah. We both have seen the devastation of the AIDS, HIV pandemic, how drugs have impacted the community. You say you come to the Castro now occasionally. You moved out of San Francisco a few years ago because it got too expensive. Yeah. What do you think when you encounter the San Francisco gay community nowadays? It's hard. Well, there's so many communities. I'm glad you brought up the AIDS pandemic. I moved into the city in 1983, and I was 26, and really just kind of still finishing my coming out. It had taken a while. I told my parents when I was 18, but I wasn't magically comfortable being gay. Then you got to figure out how to be physically intimate with people, and what is love, and how do you get into relationships and get out of them. And then in my mid-20s, early mid-20s, people started dying, and they just died and died and died.
And you saw it.
Died and died and died and died and died, and it kept going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think, in a way that I'm still not clear about, that shaped my approach to life, which is life is going to hand you this thing. You better learn how to respond. I don't really make very good executive decisions about my life. Deciding to teach yoga, I just sort of fell into it. Playing music, I fell into it. Journalism, I fell into it. But something big is going to come, so be ready. That's what AIDS taught me about. I got angry that the city is changing, big buildings and tech firms and all that kind of stuff, and I was priced out of my apartment, and I was rageful about it for about a year. And then, I've sort of adjusted to living in the suburbs, and when I come up to the Castro now, I see a lot of straight couples, strollers, babies, and they're very hip, like super cool, right? But
like the straight people we wish we'd had in the 80s.
Yeah, but I think the Castro is probably going to change, and maybe it's not going to be a gay neighborhood forever, but it wasn't an Irish neighborhood forever.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, so do you necessarily think that's a bad thing? What do you say to the people who say, I want to keep it like it was?
Well, I think that the basis of that question is, do we need a safe space? Right? The Castro was, for a long time, a safe space for people who had the crap beaten out of them out there. They'd move to the Castro, be among people like them. And I think all of that is really changing. I mean, we have marriage equality now. You know what I mean? If I'm a first-class citizen for the first time in my life legislatively, do I need a safe space? I don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to a 26-year-old coming to San Francisco now? Because, you know, the answer, do we need a safe space? I guess in a sense everyone needs a safe space. I remember when I came here in '86, at that same age,
Right.
I had never met a transgender person. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the T in LGBT was.
Right.
And I have been educated over the last few years, and especially in the last two,
It's
about...
fantastic, isn't it, what's happening?
It is incredible.
Caitlyn Jenner, it just says one thing.
Well, it's personally moving because I like to think of myself as well-read and well-traveled, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself that for me, for so many years, gay was just the Castro, and it was white, and it was
Right.
it was male.
I was going to say white male privilege is why we're, we got the blinkers sometimes.
Do you still feel it? I mean, I feel it as I get older. It's like I didn't think I was a privileged white male in my 40s, but at 53, and I see the people, struggling in Europe to get from Syria, and I see people crossing our border, and I hear Donald Trump spewing his hatred. There's a lot of white privilege to go around.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I try to keep in mind is that I was born and raised American, and I was born and raised in this body, and this body is here and your body is there. The only thing I can do is listen to your experience, right? I can't know your experience. You could say the studio lights are hot, and I'll relate because I know what warm means, but I don't know what your experience is, right? So listening to your experience. As an American, I have a particular experience. It's going to really color, like I've grown up in all kinds of privilege. All of us have, in a way. I mean, there are really hurting people in this country, don't get me wrong, but I haven't known what it is to be a refugee. So all I can do is listen to the experience, you know what I mean? I think it's weird. I was raised upper middle class white male in the 20th century America at its peak, right? But as a gay man, I always felt second class. And I was told I was second class. And so, though I don't align my experience with, say, somebody who grows up African American and it's on their skin, and that kind of racism you see every day, or a Syrian refugee, I know what it's like to feel like you have the keys to the kingdom and be told that, sorry, the gate is locked. You can't come in.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Has yoga helped you personally unlock that gate? And do you think yoga can help some of the other people unlock their gates?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like the gay community. There's so many different forms of yoga and what that means. If you mean, by yoga, you mean meditation, yes, it helps a lot. And not just sort of mindful, everybody says, like, let's make this Zen, right? Not even knowing what Zen means, but just a kind of capacity to be calm and present, maybe. Right. You know what I mean? Because in the end, we're in our 50s now, right? Time is getting short. There is going to come an end. I will lie in my final shavasana, right? My corpse pose. So it helps you edit, just like a good journalist. And the only thing that seems to matter to me now is love. Long-term friendships, history, people you share history with, family. Like the rest is kind of gravy, I guess.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure being with you.
I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for doing this. This is awesome. To keep this conversation going, it's great.
Thank you, Dave. Namaste. We've been speaking with Dave Ford. Next up, our conversation with art blogger Kevin Thomas, who will talk to us about the Zen of the coming art season in San Francisco. We'll be right back.